Well, hello internet. How are you all doing today? Welcome to my very first art video on YouTube. Truth to be told, I had this video in my drafts for a while and there was something in the air today, so I decided to just go ahead and post it. If you're an artist and you're looking for an art friend to sit with you while you're drawing, then consider this my application. Hi! I'm Mella and I live in Germany, southern Germany to be exact, which is a really beautiful place to live in. I'm not a trained artist. I didn't study it at university or anything. I wasn't even really good at art in school, but in the past couple of years, I actually fell in love with doing art. Specifically, I started out with the art of lettering. I've always loved letters, and a couple of years ago, I fell in love with simple pencil and monoline lettering. And I kept seeing all of the beautiful art on Instagram that other artists do with watercolor, and I thought I want to do that too. And somehow I ended up falling in love with urban watercolor specifically. And I really want to get better with it. I want to study it more and I want to meet people who are also into art along the way. So if that is interesting to you, then please be my friend and also please subscribe to this YouTube channel because I have a couple of more videos lined up that I'm pretty excited about that I'm going to upload. But for now, I think I should talk a little bit about what I'm painting here and the inspiration behind it. So, this is a cafe from the TV series Hometown Cha-Cha-Cha, which is one of my top favorite K-drama TV series. I rewatch it at least once a year. It centers around Heejin, who lives in Seoul, and she quits her job on a whim because she's unhappy with how her manager is handling things. She is working in a dentist's office and she feels that her superior is exploiting their patients for money. She then badmouths her superior on some dentist internet forum, so she can't find a new job in all of Seoul. No one would hire her. So she moves to the coast because she heard it's cheaper to open up your own dentist practice in the countryside in a smaller city. And in this beach village, she at first kind of butts heads with the locals a lot because she comes in with her Seoul big city attitude and doesn't realize that she stepped into a pretty close-knit community that does not appreciate that attitude at all. Over time, though, she slowly befriends people and she's accepted into the community as a whole. And what I really loved about this TV series were the characters. They all have their own fleshed out backstory, their own reasons why they behave the way they do. They weren't afraid to show feelings. They're kind, but they also have their flaws, obviously. And I really appreciated the characters, yeah, being so well thought out. And this building here that I'm painting is kind of like the local cafe or restaurant. It's run by this single father. He is a washed up musician and had like a number 2 hit a couple years ago. And he still hangs on to that, hoping that one day he'll make it back to fame. And funnily enough, he doesn't even know at the beginning of the TV series how to make a decent cup of coffee. The coffee at first is disgusting. He does learn over the course of the series, though. Anyway, I just really fell in love with this building. I think the shape is so interesting and the textures of it. I love the greenery on top and I love the color. I just adore when buildings have a color other than the white or gray. And this mint color specifically spoke to me. I actually didn't have a mint watercolor and I probably could have mixed it, but I'm not a big fan of mixing watercolors. I personally find it kind of hard to do, especially if you're trying to cover a larger area. I find it challenging to keep the tone consistent. So I took the safe route and I bought a mint watercolor to put in my paint palette. I'm using one of my smaller paint palettes here. Whenever I do a project like this, I really try to limit myself to one palette for a painting or a page in my sketchbook. Firstly, because don't tell this to anyone, but I have a lot of watercolors. I love all of my palettes. They're my babies, and I spend a lot of time going over the colors and admiring and just, yeah, doodling around with them. But secondly, if I were to use more than one watercolor palette at a time, it would just really confuse me. I did have to grab a green from another palette at some point during this picture because I couldn't quite get the contrast the way I wanted to with the greenery. But normally I like to just keep it to one palette. I also think if I use too many colors from too many different palettes, the painting's color story gets kind of all jumbled up and there's no coherency and it becomes too busy. So I like to make it easy and limit myself to one palette, a painting. So I really love this building and I finally felt brave enough to paint it. I have been doing watercolors regularly for over a year and a half now, and that's actually not too long of a time frame if you think about it. And my dream has been from the start to see a building, sit down, and translate it onto watercolor paper for me. So that is what I'm working on and what this channel is also kind of about, to share my process with you, maybe meet some people who are also on a similar journey, and to find someone to discuss the best watercolors with and where you can get the most beautiful mint watercolor. So that's what you'll see here. Lots of watercolor, trying out, sketching, and maybe even some lettering. Though I really love to crawl into the paper when I'm lettering, so I have yet to figure out how to film that. I haven't filmed the sketch for this one because truthfully, I was really afraid of this one because the shape of the house is so out of the ordinary. It's not just a box, and it was important for me to get the perspective right. And I tried it on loose sheets of paper first, and then I traced my own sketch onto the watercolor paper. I did this painting a while ago. Like I said at the beginning, I was actually scared to upload this. And if I would paint it again today, I would probably already approach a sketch like this differently. I really try to sketch more on my own and also directly on watercolor to become braver and more comfortable with my own sketches. But this was one of the first things I painted on my own in a long time at the time when I did it, so I'm not mad at past me for taking the safer approach, so to speak. There is a lot of discourse in the art spaces that I frequent where people are saying not to sketch on watercolor paper directly because it ruins the paper if you use your eraser. And stuff like that gets to my head easily. And then most of the time, I end up not doing any art at all out of fear of doing it wrong. But thinking about it, if I were to go out and sketch, I would probably also sketch directly on the watercolor paper on location and not use loose sheets of paper first. So I want to be braver doing that. Not that I disagree with the approach of handling your material carefully, but not to the point where it actually stops you from making art, you know? I actually painted this back in November, so when I went to edit this video, it was really interesting to me how I would approach it differently just 2 months later. Like I said, I would probably sketch directly onto the paper, and I was surprised to see that I put the brown colors down first. I think now I would probably start with the sky and the floor and then move on to painting the house. I painted this in my watercolor sketchbook from Etchr, which is a B6 size. I find that size really good because it's not too big, but it's also not too small. And this was actually also my very first etchr sketchbook. For watercolors, I used I think it's a French brand called Charvin. And I really enjoyed painting with these watercolors. But like I said, the one green wasn't dimensional enough for me, so I took out my other watercolor palette to add a little bit darker green at the bottom to kind of mimic the shadow of the plants. You have probably seen me use a couple of different brushes. I typically use a size 4 a lot, simply because I find it the most versatile size. I can paint larger areas without getting tired, but I can also paint really small details without having to change the brush a lot. And I had just recently gotten a couple of new brushes, which are the green ones from vinci Nova Synthetic, I think, which I really enjoyed using. I have been using them ever since I got them, I think, in every painting, because I just find the sizes extremely good. So first I did all of the watercolors, as you've probably watched me do, but I wasn't entirely satisfied with it. It somehow looked kind of flat to me. And that's something that I struggle with a lot when I do my own studies of buildings. So here I went in with colored pencils and also graphite pencils. I wanted this building to not look as polished as it did with just the watercolor. I wanted it to kind of look rough and like it's been standing there for a couple of years. So I used graphite in various softness degrees to kind of smudge around the edge of things and to kind of bring in some shadows. I don't hate it, but I will admit if I would be painting it again now, I would do it differently. I actually put a reminder in my phone because I think I want to paint this again in this upcoming November to see how I have evolved and how my painting process has changed. I think repainting it now would be too soon, but things I would change right now, for example, I would give the plants a little bit of a shadow. I would make the stones on the lower wall smaller. I think they look a little bit too big and that makes them look too artificial. And yeah, I don't hate it, just to be clear. I think I can be quite happy with the result, but I remember not liking it when I first painted it, which is also why I didn't immediately sit down to edit this video. But looking at it now, I actually quite like it. Sometimes it takes a month or two to like what you've created, and I think we've all been there. I definitely have been. The last step to do was to add the lettering, and I actually had to write the name out on a scrap piece of paper because I was scared to forget an entire word or just a letter in the lettering. It's happened before and I hate when it does. I decided to letter the title of the cafe in a bright orange because I thought it would complement the mint color of the building, and I actually absolutely love the orange next to the mint color. I did just go in with a painting brush directly, which is a fairly new thing I have been trying out. Normally I would, draw myself some guidelines to make sure everything is straight and in order and that the letters are all of the same height. But I've been trying to let a little bit loose and be okay if not everything is perfect. And honestly, this isn't perfect. I was actually a little bit sad about the lettering as well at first. It gets bigger towards the end, and during lettering, I was scared that the word moonlight wouldn't fit at all in the space that I wanted it to fit into. Thankfully, it did, but at first I thought I had ruined the entire painting. Now I'm looking at it again and I wish I would have given myself some more grace. My buildings are gonna come out slightly crooked. Maybe the shadow doesn't make sense everywhere and my letters are all over the place, but also that's me. That's my painting that I spend hours on, and I think that deserves a little bit more credit and a little bit more pride. So if there's one thing you want to take away from this video, it's to not be mad if your painting doesn't come out perfectly the way you wanted to have it come out or the way you imagined it in your head. I know I'm still having to learn that my paintings don't come out the way I want them to or picture them in my head. And sometimes I can deal better with it because they are still my paintings, and sometimes I can't deal with it at all. And sometimes I even look at my pictures a month after I painted them and I actually love them. And that is the case with this painting because I did this painting all by myself, top to bottom. For every line that is on this paper, it was decided by me that this line deserves to be there. So I'm not mad, and that is why I ultimately decided to show this painting to you after all. Also, a side note, I'm going to get better with the camera angles too in my next videos, I promise. Sometimes you can't see entirely what I'm doing, but I also only have one device I film this with, so I have to change everything every time I want a different angle, which I just have to remember to do more often, so please bear with me here. I'm not only learning how to paint, but also how to film while painting, edit, doing a voiceover, everything. So we're coming up to the end here. Thank you so much for watching my very first video. That is so exciting. I hope you enjoyed your time with me. I hope we can hang out again soon. Don't forget to subscribe and maybe even look me up on Instagram and shoot me a message. My name on there is the same as on here. And have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye!